Now, today on this Mother's Day, we're talking about Taoism. And we started last week. We're using this book, Simple Taoism, A Guide to Living in Balance, for our discussion. And we're talking about it every Sunday this month, as well as every Wednesday this month. This past Wednesday, we talked about it. This coming Wednesday, I'll be there again to talk about it. And if you missed the first Wednesday, you can stop by the information table outside under the monitor and pick up the reading guide and catch up to speed, or just come along this current Wednesday and we'll talk about it. I did stop by that information table under the monitor, and there are such interesting things there. There is a flyer about the master's degree in consciousness studies. Do you know that we have a complete adult education program here that offers an accredited master's program? There's information about the upcoming workshop, Living Your Life on Purpose. These are handy-sized flyers to take home with you. About the Saturday morning meditation opportunities. About Project Sleep Warm, one of our most favorite outreach programs where you can learn how to help people be warm when the winter comes, homeless people. Seniors in Spirit, how to get connected through man's spirit, men who want to go on retreat together or share food on the first Saturdays, the Wisdom Circle and networking for business and spirituality, nonviolent communication. Oh my God, Death Makes Life Possible, groups and outreach ministries, who's speaking on Wednesdays, what the topics are on Sundays, classes. I mean, it's going on over here. So, you want to know what's going on out there, you got to be proactive and go find out. It's too much to make an announcement, but there's something here for you, for sure. But back to the topic. What was it? Taoism. So we started last week with a quote from the little book, Taoism, and I want to get it right, so I brought it along. The Chinese, like the Indians, believe that there is an ultimate reality which underlies and unifies the multiple things and events we observe. They call this reality the Tao, which originally meant the way. It is the way, or the process of the universe, the order of nature. Now, as a recap, I mentioned last week that in our own teaching here, we call this ultimate reality the thing itself. That's what we call it. And indeed, in our textbook, our Science of Mind textbook, the whole first chapter is dedicated to explaining the thing itself. And we call the process of this reality law, spiritual law. And indeed, the second and third chapter of our textbook is dedicated to explaining the law. And one of the things that we strive to explain is that this reality and its law is neutral. In other words, it just is. So then things like beautiful and ugly are projections onto its neutralness, and things like good and bad are interpretations. Now, starting this week, we start right there, say, well, whether or not it's projection and whether or not it's interpretation, we still have to deal with it. Because there it is. We have to deal with the polarities in life because we do have such a thing as right and wrong, good and bad, ups and downs. The great mystery is, how does it all fit together in this idea of oneness when clearly there is two-ness? Well, the way Taoism makes sense of it is very directly. They just say, well, it does fit together. Seamlessly, naturally, effortlessly. In fact, Taoism suggests, so don't try to make one part of it good and bad, and the other part bad, and one part of it right and the other part wrong. Instead, embrace it all as a series of matched pairs that are flowing together endlessly in this dance that we call life. They call it yin-yang. And you see the symbol that represents it behind me, and it represents, through this symbol, this interchanging, dynamic play of opposites that make up the whole, known as the Tao, or life, or the thing itself. Now, in our center, we have a similar way of expressing the same thing. We say that this one ultimate reality, the thing itself, it expresses a variety of forms. From the one, diversity rises up. And all of diversity has this interacting balance of all the elements of good and bad, right and wrong, up and down. The one gives rise to the many. It's a concept to struggle with, and I remember something that helped me tremendously, how we can all be from one and be so different. You may recall Dr. David Bruner. He's one of our favorite speakers. He comes from San Jose. He's quite a colorful speaker. I've known him for a very, very long time, and his very first job out of school was in a supermarket, a grocery store. He was a bag boy, I think that's what they called it. So he became very familiar with all of the products in the store. And one day he said to me, have you ever noticed how many different kinds of crackers there are? I said, no. So he listed them for me. Garden crisps, orchard crisps, sociables, vegetable thins, bacon thins, chicken in a biscuit, Ritz, regular Ritz, whole wheat, better cheddar, low salt Triscuits, wheat and bran Triscuits, snorkels, Mr. Phipps, 3 varieties, tater crisps, Ritz cheese, oat thins, wheat thins, low salt wheat thins, nutty thins, multigrain thins, reduced fat wheat thins, low salt Triscuits, rye Triscuits, garden herb Triscuits, Snackwells, 4 varieties, Wheatsworth premium, original, low salted, blah, 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 and he carried on. And then he paused and he said, and the thing is, I said, yes, what is the thing? He said, the amazing thing is that all of them, the ingredients for all of them, all start with the same thing: enriched flour or whole wheat, processed water, and spices. They said, there we have it. He said, variety out of the same substance. The many produces the one. And it occurred to me, this is exactly like reality. We're all made of the same stuff with different emphasis. Some of us are salty. Some of us are stale. Some of us are cheesy. Some of us mix with everything. Some of us don't. But we are made of the same stuff in a way of thinking, related but different. We're made up of the big everything, and there's this merging that goes on. So we can say, oh yeah, that's my neighbor. He just comes from a different box of crackers. See, I've never forgot that, because it's helped me reconcile this idea of, like in Taoism, they say it slightly differently. They say reality is thought to be produced out of a relationship of these apparent opposites in different degree. Yin and yang, yin being the soft, feminine, passive, the black part of the symbol. Yang being the hard, active, masculine, the white part. And all of life is thought to be a product of this interplay, but they are thought to be complementary, not opposing forces. And together they create the whole range of creation, which is larger than the sum of its parts. Now, in the little book we're reading, it says that the Taoist sage believes that every force interacts with its seeming opposite in a very particular relationship way. Now, and I brought it along just so I'd get it quite correct. It says, thus, if a government punishes a group severely, it may bring about its own punishment later by that very group. The opposite complementary force comes to be in time as night follows day, as winter follows summer. So, the Taoist sage learns to be in harmony with these cycles of activity and inactivity. And I read that and I thought to myself how very interesting this is, especially for our times. You know, no one escapes the relationship, the flow. No person, no government. At the center, we call this relationship of energies the law of reciprocity, and it simply means that there is a relationship between everything, an inescapable relationship between giving and receiving, between starting and ending, between loving and hating. Push has its pull. Stop has its start. And when I ignore that relationship or try to live outside of its governance, it results in a sense of disorder and uneasiness in my life, and systems break down. I have a friend, and she used to tell me, she would describe herself as being a good initiator. She was very proud of saying, I love to start projects. And, once it's up and running, then I'm out of there because I lose interest. So we got to talk about it a little bit. And I said, well, how's that working for you? And she said, well, actually, because I don't really deal with the endings, sometimes it's an imbalanced system, because then in the middle it disintegrates. So we got to talk about how she could spread out her attention and be more balanced in her focus between both ends of projects. Similarly, I have a friend who describes herself as an excellent giver, very generous, but she was lamenting the fact that there didn't seem to be anyone around her who was being generous towards her. So we got to explore it a little bit, and we got to discover that actually she was neglecting practicing and refining her style of receiving. So she was very good at giving to the point where it made it difficult for people to give to her. And so she experienced it as an imbalanced system. And I started to look into my own life and see, wherever I ignore the reciprocal nature of this existence, it is typical that confusion starts to bubble up in me. I've got to get back into balance. I've got to get back into alignment with the way. And we talked about that last week, how specifically to get back into alignment with your way, with everybody's own individual way. We talked about it some more on Wednesday. And don't worry, if you missed last week's service, you can watch it for free on our website, www.cslsr.org. Now, the idea of yin and yang, or the reciprocal nature of the universe, is that each seeming opposite, not only interacts with each other, but it has an influence on each other. It's all related. This is a good slide for Mother's Day. Parents influence their children, and children, in turn, have an effect on their parents. Societies influence their members just as individual members can make lasting changes in society. All are in mutual interaction in the flow. So it says to me, a little bit of the parent is in the child. A little bit of child is in the parent. A little bit of society is in the individual. A little bit of the individual is in society. A little bit of selfishness is in kindness. A little bit of kindness is in selfishness. In every mother is the energy of father, and in every father is the energy of mother. And so yin and yang are the complementary, interdependent, seeming opposites, and neither can exist without the other. Originally, the term yin-yang referred to the dark side of a mountain and the sunlit bright side of the mountain, together making up a complete whole, even though at any point you and I may only be able to perceive one part of it, still one. And all of it, the entire mountain and its complementary parts, all made possible by one powerful source of constant energy called chi, or life, or spirit. Now, in the West, this is a fairly new idea, really. In fact, in the West, we tend in the West to go to polarities more quickly. By what I mean by that is a person is thought to be good or bad, but not a combo. And if there is something bad about a person, then that means everything is bad about that person. And Taoism is whispering, not so quickly. I was thinking about this, we're getting ready for elections in 2016. So you may have noticed the search for background dirt is on the rise. Right? Because if you can find something bad about a candidate, it means everything is bad about that candidate. And Taoism is whispering, not so quickly. Because black and white thinking has its problems. You can see how that shows up in relationship, black and white thinking. Oh, if a partner makes a mistake, then that means that partner can never be trusted again. Taoism is whispering, not so quickly. It's whispering, there may be another way of looking at life. I'm speaking for Taoism, try to see each apparent state containing a little bit of its opposite. A long time ago, I used to counsel people. I was a professional spiritual guide, a professional prayer practitioner. I can't do that anymore because my duties take up all of my time at the center. But I loved doing that work because I got to sit with people and talk about the difficulties of their journey. And when people would come to see me, one of the things I would sometimes do, I would say to them, all right, tell me what's wrong with you. And they would be startled for a moment, but once they settled down, because there was this invitation and welcome, and because I knew people had a long list of what's wrong with themselves, right? They would start to tell me all the things that were wrong with them, and I would take a pen and I would write carefully down every single thing that they said. And then when they were done, I would go to the beginning of the list and start with the first thing on the list, because maybe, for example, they said, I don't make decisions quickly enough. Then I would say to them, okay, and now tell me how this is also your greatest strength. And then they would do what you just did. See, they would take a moment to breathe that in. And very often we could get to that place where if we step back a little bit, we could see the spectrum. We could see the reality that nothing is solely good or bad. It's more like a sliding scale. It's a blend. And it's like masculinity and femininity in a woman or a man. Each person lands somewhere on the scale in between the polarities in their right place. Now, I was thinking about a title of a book that reflects this. The title was, Every Saint Has a Past and Every Sinner a Future. It's the same thing. It's the challenge of Taoism. It challenges us to think of life as consisting of parts that complement each other. And I think about that. Imagine teaching future generations that all of us are part of each other's universe and well-being. And as different as we are, we're all just made up of flour, water, and spices. So the points I'm extracting from Taoism that are of interest to me, and maybe they will be to you too, are these. First of all, everything contains its opposite. The light dot in the black part and the black part in the light dot serve to remind us of that. That the pairs of opposite make up the whole, and yet they have components of each other in them. Day cannot be day without night, and there is a blend between the two. Front and back, both necessary for the whole. And a stranger is just a friend you do not know. Remember Jim Reeves? I'm sure some of you are young enough to remember. Nobody? Okay. Thank you. Well, maybe some of you remember Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. He said similar things, talking about dealing with strangers. He said, what you do to the least of these, you do also to me. It's the idea that there's a bit of everybody and everybody else. So you can take that out and think, those who seem to be the least worth my attention, or those who are the most undesirable, or those who seem to be the most opposite to my politics, or those who seem to be the most enemy-like, are also part of the whole. And not only that, a little bit of them is in me and a little bit of me is in them. Ooh. Second thing I'm noticing about Taoism is that, and everything changes. The symbol indicates that it's fluid. It looks like it's swirling. The symbol itself suggests that apparent opposites not only complement each other, but are moving into each other, almost evolving into each other. If we take a step back, that's when we can see Oh, enemies become friends, friends become enemies. The symbol suggests that everything is in process, in constant motion, a motion of yielding into each other, flowing into each other. All things are in transition. Nothing is permanent, yet everything stays the same. And the third thing is this: and in that dance, everything is always balanced. From the Taoist point of view, although everything is moving through stages as part of its existence, there's a balancedness in the system. So wherever we draw a line through the symbol, it's balanced. Another group of authors on Taoism, Brandon Toropov and Chant Hansen, they wrote these words about it, saying, "In approaching any experience, we are asked not to pick one element over the other, and not to mistake the various expressions of balance as being in conflict with each other. Instead, we are asked to understand the ways in which they may be related to each other." Wow, this is good for me, because I tend to do just what they're saying we ought not to do. Another word for it is obsess. That's what I do, especially if I'm unconscious, especially if I'm feeling hurt. Then what I do is I focus on one aspect. And in my mind, I tell myself how it's separate from everything else and it's in opposition to everything else. And Taoism's whispering in my ear, not so fast. It's the same thing that happens when people fall in love, right? You heard that love is blind? Heard that phrase? You know, when we fall in love, then the beloved is faultless. When more realistically, they have issues. It's all balanced out. Their faultlessness and their issues. In fact, it's not that noticing they have issues doesn't really take away from their beauty. It's the opposite. It's the idealization of one component, one aspect of them that causes trouble when the other shoe falls. Out of balance. As I read through and remember Taoism, one of the things I'm becoming aware of is how very much I am a product of Western thinking, and how I have the tendency to focus on hard distinctions between right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. I can see how I could benefit from listening to the whispering of Taoism saying to me, "Not so fast, Edward. Calm down. There's another way to view life." I try to imagine Taoism whispering to me, "Try to imagine everyone and everything as being related. Try to see how a little bit of you is in a little bit of everything. Try to see how everything is in constant flow, on the move and in relationship with everything else. Try to think softly like water." I can see the benefit for me to try that. And next week, we're going to talk about Wu Wei, which is thinking like water. Yeah. So I invite you now to breathe in with me and to exhale, letting your eyes close as we enjoy a moment of prayer together. And in our affirmative prayer, I invite you to either listen to the words I speak or to adjust them, replace them with words of your own in your own silence. But let each one of us acknowledge that presence, the thing itself. Whatever word we use is just a word, whether we say spirit or the Tao or life or the ultimate being. We acknowledge that we mean similar things. We are stretching our thought to acknowledge that endless, eternal, powerful, all-knowing source that gives rise to complexity, diversity, and to the forms in our world. In this moment of prayer, then, I'm identifying myself with this great, mysterious something, as being a product of it, existing within it, in my right place with every person here, indeed with all beings everywhere. And as I dwell upon this rightness, this connection, I become aware, I realize of the tremendous power that is at my disposal to think, to choose, to project, to interpret. And I let myself become aware by means of this prayer. That's what's doing it for me. I let myself become aware of my ability to use all of this power in a beautiful, proactive, harmonious way, not only for myself and my own life, but for all beings everywhere. I become aware that I'm at a point of choice in my life at any moment, and that the way I get up and move into the world from this service is completely at will. I have the ability to move through this life using any quality of being that I determine I desire. I see that as a blessed privilege, and I take it seriously. In this moment of creation and possibility, I salute all that is with gratitude, and I recognize that it is according to spiritual law that this prayer works. And what I mean by that is that it is done unto me as I believe, and I feel the deep sense of believing today that I am free, I am creative, and I am an agent of the divine. And so I let that settle into my being, and I let it affect the way I show up, and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is.